The place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Friday, September 29th, 2023, and this is episode 798 of Living Free in Tennessee. And my camera just went out of focus. Anyway, it's a Homestead Happenings Day, so we're going to talk about what's been going on in the Homestead. And with the Self-Reliance Festival like so close to us right now, there's not a lot of forward momentum on the Homestead. It's more about focusing on being ready to be gone for a few days here and have somebody else in. And then of course we're cruising into winter pretty fast. Like last night I put on my Snuggie that my mom made me, that she knitted for me, for the first time. So, I sleep in like shorts and a t-shirt because it's hot, right? And then I got cold and put the Snuggie over the shorts and a t-shirt, which is weird because I could have just put on warmer PJs, but that was my strategy, which means fire season is soon. The fire heating season, which is a nice time of year, except for right now I need to move my wood stove. So that's interesting. Although, it's all installed where it is, so I can use it right now as is where it is. Of course, if you want to get questions in today's show or you want me to see your comments, do me a favor, put the word question : in all caps, and then I will do my best to answer that question within the context of the show. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Being gone from the homestead every single day for part of the day and what that means. Forward momentum on the homestead despite having a lot of stuff come up and being busy. Jerky roosters, preparing the homestead for being gone, and the last round of harvest. Before we do that, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show, and that's the Midwest Preparedness Project's festival, which starts next week. It's already here. MidwestPreparednessProject.com. It's in Kansas. If you want to get out and meet fellow homesteaders, you can do it at the Midwest Preparedness Project. Just head on over there and to MidwestPreparedness.com to find out more about the event. It's a giant camping event. I will be speaking on Friday about the 15-minute homestead, and it's mostly a discussion about building homestead management into your busy life through a series of 5 to 15-minute projects, and just how I organize that. And I can tell you that it goes well most of the time, but not all the time. This is not a one size fits all fix, but I think this is the first time I've done this presentation. I'm also going to do a member workshop about it, like online in November, to just talk about the strategy and system that we've put in place here and go over that and share it with you all, because I do hear the same complaint from homesteaders for different times of the year about just not knowing how to get it all done. And I realized that if I think about dinner over coffee in the morning and get it started, that at the end of the day, I have dinner on time. And if I don't, then it's a little trickier unless I have some grab and go meals. Like even yesterday, I will talk about what I did to cook them, but I packaged up pork chops in vacuum sealed bags that I needed to. They were pre-frozen from our pigs. And I realized is that I need to think about future Nicole as part of this process. Future Nicole is happier when current Nicole does something ahead of time, so it makes her life easier. And one thing that makes my life easier is putting in seasonings with things like pork chops and steaks and then vacuum sealing them, because then I can put it straight in the sous vide from the freezer, cook it for a couple of hours, and sear it off, and that's dinner. And that's an example of one of our quick meals. So it took me 5 extra minutes to season up these packages rather than just shove the pork chops in and seal them. That's an example of a 5-minute job on the homestead that allows me to connect with my food, eat healthy, have a better experience at the end of the day, even when I'm busy. So it's just going to be a bunch of things like that, and sort of how I start top down and build one thing in at a time. Our first sponsor of today's show is hollerroast.com, and I'm bringing it up because once a year or twice a year, we get a very special coffee in the door, and that's Jack's Bourbon Cooled Sumatra, which is the Sumatra bean that he and I chose together way back when I did my first personality coffee. And every year we sell out really quickly. The beans came in about 2 weeks ago, and I decided that I would launch up the product on October 1st just because it's a nice tidy time to do it. And I had already sent my monthly email when I realized this was all coming together. I was pretty sure it would. Sometimes coffee shipments get delayed though. So Jack's Bourbon Cooled Sumatra is a bean that I take and cool with bourbon, which cools it faster and brings out more of the sweet tones of the coffee. You can get that at hollowroast.com. Just head over there and click on the coffee shop, or it's hollowroast.com/product/bourbon cooled. And our second sponsor of today's show is Discount Mylar Bags. Toby from Discount Mylar Bags has been kind enough to sponsor our show. And he also has some really awesome food storage resources put together over at discountmylarbags.com. Just look on the right-hand side and you'll see all of his philosophy about storing. He's just a real good empowerer in our network. So if you're going to get Mylar bags, go to him first. He supports the show. He supports the network. We will see him in person at the Self-Reliance Festival. With that, it's time for our first segment of today's show, and that is Featured Forage. This is where we talk about what we're getting off the land. But I decided not to give you a list of what I'm getting off the land today because I gave you that list last week. It ain't that different from last week, right? So today, I want to talk about why we forage. Because I was on a live stream yesterday with Louise Milliman, and she was talking about just living on her off-grid homestead and the nutrition of the food and how cool it is to go to your garden. I'm like, what's even cooler is you go out in the yard and you can just like eat the weeds. And we were talking about eating the weeds and using herbal remedies from weeds, because Carrie Brown is doing a wild edible walk at the Self-Reliance Festival in 2 weeks. He's doing 2 of them. And it's really cool to be out and about and see something like lamb's quarter or stinging nettle or watercress or Jerusalem artichokes or sassafras or a persimmon tree or a pawpaw tree or wild elderberry, like all of these things that are just out there, edible wild mushrooms, which are a little scary to people, but all of that stuff is just growing. It does not take cultivation. It just grows itself. And one of the things I believe about these things that are growing out in the real world is that because we haven't been cultivating and mining the land and like tilling it every so often, they have developed a balance with where they're at to where I think they're bringing up, personally, this is just my opinion, bringing up more of the micronutrients that we need. And they tend to be available seasonally. So the neat thing about wild foraging is I think it helps you connect with micronutrients you may not know you even need, especially if when you're hiking in the woods, there's this plant that keeps talking to you and then you discover it's, lamb's quarter or something, or winter mint or whatever, and winter green, and you consume it, and it, like, somehow there is a connection there that you realize I need something that plant has. Now, you don't just want to go out and start randomly eating plants, right? You want to know what they are and verify that they're safe. Most plants are safe, but there are some ones that can really hurt you. So you got to be careful. Anyway, that's one reason to forage. But the other reason to forage, if you are in a situation where you can forage, is it keeps your grocery bill down. So a lot of people are really feeling the strain at the grocery store right now. And if you are in a semi-rural area or have a 1 or 2 acre lot or have somewhere nearby that's a decent location for foraging, you can go out and forage your salad for tonight's dinner, which is pretty darn cool because you don't have to buy micro lettuces or whatever you're buying at the store, or heads of lettuce for $4 or $5. Sometimes they're $3. You can just go out on a walk, get that healthy experience of being outside, and then come back with tonight's dinner or greens that you can saute. And this phase of foraging goes into October. in Tennessee, and then we get to everything that's below the ground. So what's happening right now is I'm getting leafy things above the ground. What'll happen after a few frosts is Jerusalem artichokes are ready and things of that nature. So it'll be the tubers below the ground. And it's the same thing. I literally can walk outside if I know where Jerusalem artichokes are growing or grew in the summer, which is a beautiful flower. And I can dig down and I get edible tubers. So I think learning a plant a year is a great goal if you're looking for a way to increase your knowledge and integrating it into what you do. It's a great way to start. You can start with mint and you have mint. I will never buy mint tea again, especially after the harvest I got this year. I put one small chocolate mint plant in my yard last year and it's like I have so much chocolate mint. It's amazing. I've gotten to the point where I have to dry it in creative ways. And I love mint tea. Like last night, I really wanted a cocktail, but I also don't want to drink alcohol every day. And usually as things get busy near an event, I'm like, cocktail at night to celebrate that I did all these things today that were hard for me to do. Nope. I made a peppermint tea and I had a peppermint tea. And no, it's not the same as a bourbon on the rocks, right? But it's a non-sweet thing that is delicious and I felt good after it and it's not alcohol. So sometimes that's what I like herbal teas instead of alcohol at night sometimes. And it really helps me keep my immune system up and my health on check. And I really have to concentrate on that at this time of year. So that's my why forage. The other thing that came up is I was asked over at freesteading.com to talk about how to make salves because I had just sort of said, make a salve out of jewelweed in passing last week. And somebody's like, but how? And I can tell you how I make salves. There are videos all over the internet about how to make salves. But the person who asks said just was not quite sure because they didn't have the right consistency in their salves. So what I do is I get high quality coconut oil to extract the essence of the plant. And we're going to use jewelweed as an example of how I do that one. You can make salves from dried plants or fresh plants. I like to make jewelweed from fresh plants. I don't want to dry it first because its purpose in life is to help with itching, and I want to get those fresh oils. Well, what this means is you have more water in your salve than you would normally like, right? So you put, basically, I measure very carefully. No, I don't. I wait till the plant is blooming, and then I harvest leaves and flowers, and I fill my crock pot with them, and I put the coconut oil in there, and I turn it on warm, not low. So I have it heat as low as possible, and I put the lid on, and I'm going to let it go for a day or two. And no, I'm not that particular about how long. Other people are, but that's kind of how I cook too. I don't really measure much. I just sort of make it taste good. When I walk by the crock pot, I take a towel and I take the lid off and I take the condensation off the top of the lid. Every time I walk by, if I'm getting a cup of coffee, if I'm getting a glass of water, I just have it in my kitchen. And once it's been about 2 days, I pull the plant matter out and I strain the oil through a screen, not a coffee filter, into mason jars. And that's my salve. But if you want to have salve that is not liquid at hot room temperatures, you need to do something with that to thicken it up. And I also want to say you can extract, instead of using coconut oil, you can use olive oil, you can use lard. You can decide what the oil is or the fat base is that you're pulling the things out with. It does not have to be coconut oil. That's just the way I learned to do it. I know people are doing great things with olive oil and with pork lard to make salves, beef tallow, whatever you want to use. So if it's not thick enough, first of all, beef tallow at room temperature is thick enough, but some people don't want to spread beef tallow all over their skin. I use beeswax to thicken it up to add solidity. So to do that, you heat the oil. And if you didn't strain it into jars and put it aside and then come back later and do this and reheat the oil, that would be great. So I put in beeswax, and beeswax melts at a very low temperature. So I'll put that in a double boiler, then pour it into the heated oil. You don't want to pour it in cold oil or it will solidify. Stir that up until it's enough beeswax that the consistency of the salve is still soft enough to spread at room temperature, whatever I'm planning for. So if I'm planning for 80-degree room temperature, I'm going to use a little bit more beeswax than if I'm planning for 72-degree room temperature, and I'm going to use even less if I'm planning for 65-degree room temperature. And this is why I'm not giving you a measurement. This is an experiment for you to figure out the ratio that works best for how you're using your salves, and if you're giving them to customers, how it works for them as well. So you mix it, let it cool, and that's how you test. And I would start with 10% and see how that goes, or less. Just a little bit of beeswax and see how it works. Do a small batch so you're not mixing a whole bunch of beeswax into a big batch, and then decide, if it's something coming out of a tin, is that the consistency I want? Is it the consistency I want for like a chapstick tube? Chapstick tubes, more beeswax than the tin for me. The reason I say this is the specific question I had was somebody who felt like they had not added enough beeswax, and unfortunately their salve was too runny. And the fix for that is possible right now. You can go back, reheat that up in your double boiler and add a little bit more beeswax, and it will be more solid. But the solidity of your salve really depends on the temperature where it's going to mostly exist. And if you put too much wax in and it's going to be in a really cold place, then what happens is you end up with something that you have to heat up to use, which is a pain in the neck. So sometimes when I get salves from people who are used to existing in warmer places of the world, in my house in the winter, in the far extremities where the wood stove isn't reaching as far, my salves are too solid. But I'll tell you really what I do is I store my salves in mason jars without any beeswax at all, because I'm not selling them, right? I don't store them in little usable size tins. And if I need it, I just take it out of the jar without any beeswax and use it. And if I need to travel with it in a little tin, I make enough of the more solid salve for my travel situation. That's how I do it. And I do it that way because there's absolutely no problem with using a salve that is in liquid form in a mason jar if I need it, if it's comfrey salve or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm using the oil as a catalyst to get the, maybe to moisturize my skin, and then also to get the essences that are in the salve to do something. And I talked about the 15-minute Homestead. It's one of my tricks, right? Is I don't go out and make the perfect jars of salve for sale because I'm not selling them. So then for me, it's more compact to store it in a big like quart mason jar, and less work if I don't have to solidify them up and put them in individual jars. And it works just as well. So that's my thought on salves. We have somebody doing a salve demonstration on Saturday at Self-Reliance Festival. If you're in the area, it's on the schedule for 11 a.m., I believe, at her booth. So just check that out. It's somebody I met a little too late in the game for the planning for this event to have her speak. But if one of our speakers gets sick, I'm throwing her up on stage to do a really cool presentation. But I'm hoping she'll be back in March to talk to us about it. And she's really focused on some cool homesteading stuff. Okay, next segment is livestock. And I'm going to take a couple of questions before we do this. Coffee questions. My question is, which is better for pour over coffee, glass, ceramic, or stainless steel? I think you talked about it on Tuesday with John. I just need a bit more guidance, please. Thanks. There are degrees of what is better in this question, and it depends on how picky you are. If you're Patrick Rohrman from MT Knives, you're really picky and you're going to care about the answer to this question. And he has a very well-developed coffee palate. I will say for most people, you're not going to really notice much of a difference. What I do for a pour over is I take a cone and I put coffee in it, and I get the water to the temperature I want, and I pour a little bit in the grounds, and I wait for those to kind of soak up the water. So just a little bit to get the grounds wet. I do this because I want them to be pre-wetted so that when I do the pour over, we're extracting more of the flavor. So I'll wait half a minute, and then I slowly pour over the water to go through the cone. I personally use a stainless steel cone because I can rinse it out and I don't need to add a paper filter to it. If you use glass or ceramic, you need to add a paper cone on top of that. And those cones are like that approach is what most pour over restaurants will do for pour overs. So apparently the coffee world thinks it's better to have the paper filter. I don't want to waste the paper even though it's compostable. I think many paper cones add a little bit of the flavor, especially the white bleached ones that are cheap. So if you're going to do paper cones, look carefully at that. So personally, I prefer the stainless steel for a variety of reasons. But the best thing to do if you're really worried about it is try a few different ones. Ask your friends who has a cone for me to test. Andrea, if you are Andrea, sorry. Andrea is my friend's name in Germany. And so when I see Andrea, I like go Andrea in my head. If you're ever near me and think I have a stainless steel pour over cone that you can try, you're welcome to ask. Like I will have one at Midwest Preparedness Project. So those are my thoughts on the pour over cone. And it is National Coffee Day, so it's a good day to take coffee questions. Loco, the Philippine nomad, asks, I enjoyed your Roasting Shack live video last week. How much do you have to adjust for heat and humidity during my roast? Not a lot. Because I adjust the Roasting Shack for heat and humidity. When I used to have no heat or cooling in the roasting trailer, I had to do a lot of adjustment, and I'd always do a sample throwaway roast at the beginning of the day to figure it out. But since I've added HVAC and I have a range between 65 degrees and 80 degrees that I'm starting with in there. Humidity is usually not as high because on our humid days, I'm cooling the air in the roasting shack. And so it's a little less humid than outside. With that, I haven't had to do a lot of adjustments, just a little bit. It's like a degree or two this way or that way. Sometimes if it goes starkly outside from like 90s to 60s, which it does twice a year in one direction, or it goes 60s to 90s, right? I may have a day of everything went up 5 degrees or everything went down 5 degrees, but that is my range. And because I spend time doing a drying phase, that's what brings the beans. It dries the beans out to a consistent humidity level in the green beans before we start doing the roast. And without that phase, that's how I would have more problems with the humidity. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about livestock. This is where we talk about the critters on the homestead. And I don't know what's going on. It's been an even keel for a week. We're like, woo, everything's been even. It doesn't mean it's not work, but there haven't been nobody's been born. Nobody's been sick. So the boys did get out. My friend came Monday and called me, and I didn't know she was here yet because I was in my studio doing work on the computer for Self-Reliance Festival. She said, "Are your boys supposed to be out?" Well, that's an interesting question. I said, "Which boys?" Because that could mean the livestock guardian dogs or the sheep. And she said, "The sheep, they're in your front driveway." And sure enough, they'd gotten out. I didn't know why. The cool thing is our boys are really friendly. So I walked up to them and petted them, and they let me, and I put a leash on Floki, walked him back to his back paddock, and it was fine. So that was the great escape event of today's show, of this week's Homestead, not today's show. The baby lambs are vibrant, so I was a little worried about the male because he wasn't as jumpy as the girls were that were born, or any of the other girls I've seen born, and I think it might just be a gender thing. He was just a little slow, and now he's not, so he's fine. Lamb Chop is doing well, and we are planning to, I think, add a couple of ewes to the homestead. I've been in conversations with somebody about that. And then selling Cloudy, who is half Katahdin, half St. Croix, and very healthy, if somebody wants a nice ewe for their homestead. So she's going to be sold this fall, or she's going to be processed. And I'm good either way. We can always use more lamb meat in our freezer. It is the time of year I get venison and beef, though. So if I could sell her to somebody who's going to use her on their homestead, that'd be great. So if you're interested in Cloudy, let me know. If not, you're going to be hearing a story about processing a lamb after Self-Reliance Festival. Duck jail. The ducks are in jail. Tactical found a whole clutch of eggs in the yard that were duck eggs, which means they are laying. They're just not laying where we can find it. So what this means is we only give them access to their coop and the duck yard for a week or so while they remember where they're supposed to lay their eggs. And that's not a surprise this year because we have a bunch of new ladies starting to lay, and they will just like put them in clutches all over the yard and hide them from you. Ducks hide their eggs. They're really good at it. But the youngest baby ducks are still in the chicken tractor that we raised them in. Tonight we're going to try the first time of having all ducks go to bed together. So we'll see how that goes. Duck jail, by the way, means they're in the yard and we let them out the last couple of hours of the day into the yard so they can go swim in the pond and stuff. And then we have to feed them more when they're in duck jail. So we'll let them out, and then it's always a 2-person effort. There'll be a 2-person effort to herd the ducks back into the duck coop so everybody can live together. And we only have one location. And then that will allow us to move the chicken tractor over near where the breast chickens are and choose which males are going to get processed. And I just talked to Tactical, and we're going to try really hard, hopefully with some holler neighbor help if they're in the area this weekend, to process bunnies that need to be processed and chickens, because the rooster breasts are starting to fight with each other, and I'm going to end up with a dead one, another one killed, if we don't reduce the ratio of roosters to females. And it's not exactly the best timing for this, but that's life on a homestead. Sometimes it's not the best timing for things. And I know that we need chickens processed. And I'm actually probably going to take a couple of those to Self-Reliance Festival because I want to give Joel Salatin when he does his demo, because he's showing us how to unalive a bird, pluck them, like all of that, and then cut it up. Well, the cut it up part is easier when it's chilled. So I want to have one that's pre-processed and has been chilled and cold and is easier to cut for him to work on. And then we'll take the other one and, just leave it whole or cut it up later, or however we want to do that. The baby ducks are escape artists. I looked out this morning and the ducks were in the yard, and I was like, did the coop fail? Because it's a box. It should not fail. And he was like, no, that's the babies. Half of them got out. The other half couldn't quite figure out how to be where they were. And then they went to the pond because he just let them out. They went to the pond, and there's a duck gate, by which we mean there's a hole cut in the fence that ducks can get through, but livestock cannot, dogs cannot. It's just like a little duck door. But it's not a door they have to push open, and it lets them get to the pond. So he said what happened is they could not figure out how to get to the side they wanted to be on. And then they all figured out how to get through the duck gate. Only half of them figured out how to get back on the other side when they bonded back on the other side. And then they were like, when duck flocks are separated, the ones they like get all upset. The ones that want to be with the other ones are like, I want to be there. And they were like trying to go through the fence and couldn't. And finally, 2 out of the 3 of them stuck on the wrong side, figured it out, and then duck panic ensued because now there was duck alone on the wrong side. That's all part of the learning process. So that one figured out how to do it too. They just have to figure it out, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, the duck gate is here. I'll go through the duck gate. So that's our cute little duck story for the week. Next up, we have Grow. This is where we talk about what's coming off the homestead, what we're doing to grow food on the homestead. I'm not doing a lot this fall because there's a lot of events this fall. So things are slowing down. We're still getting peppers. We're still getting beans. It's just slow. I'm harvesting about once a week from the garden. Tomatoes need to be picked off the tomato wall, but I'm only getting like a little basket every week right now. There are a lot of green tomatoes on there. So at some point, I'm sure I'll be talking to you about what I'm doing with my green tomatoes. But since the first frost isn't coming yet, I'm just leaving them on there for as many to vine ripen as possible. We have a big basil harvest in front of us, and I hope we get that done this week. And I will preset the basil to freeze dry because I prefer freeze dried basil as the way to store it for the winter. I need to pot up the plants that I want to overwinter soon. There's no part of me that thinks that's happening before Self-Reliance Festival. So hopefully it doesn't freeze between now and Self-Reliance Festival. Tactical's been working on a willow propagation project, and he just takes cuttings off the willow trees and then puts them in a pot, and he's had them in there for a few months, so they're probably rooted. And in a bit, he will go out and plant those throughout the property. That's one of the trees we're using for fodder trees for our animals. And then, of course, it's banana tree season. Banana tree season is that I need to build a cage around the bananas. And it was one banana tree last year. It's put up 2 extra ones. And before the first frost, I need to fill it with leaves as tall as it'll go. It'll be about 4 feet tall, full of leaves with this tube around them. That's how we overwintered them last year. And they made it through a -5-degree day. So we'll do that again. That's the one thing I know I'm doing before SRF if it looks like it's going to freeze, because I don't want to lose that thing, having invested now a year and a half in growing the thing. Am I ever going to get bananas off it? No. But it'll look pretty, and I like how it looks. That's like the only reason it's there. Next year, I'll probably have extra banana pups available for people off of this. I only plan to keep the one tree. I'm not planning to have to do this very labor-intensive process every year for more than one location on my property. It's kind of like taking care of roses. Like, I choose my rose bushes carefully because they need hand trimming and I like them, but I don't need them I don't need to be trimming like for days every fall or every winter. So that's what's up with what Homestead. Other than that, as I said last week, it's putting things to bed, getting ready for the garlic. Next up, we have harvest meals. This is where we talk about what we're eating seasonally, what we're eating. And I got my pork chop back from my friend who processed them. He used a bandsaw to cut them for me. And so we had our first ones yesterday. They were really good. I was going to cook them for dinner, but I was like super hungry at noon. So I was like, screw it. I'll cook dinner for lunch. And we did that. And then I had to come up with something else for dinner. But those are the ones that I prepackaged with spices and things so I can sous vide them at, I think it's 240 to 250 in that range, depending on how well you want them done. And then you sear them off. That's the easy button. That's like the fast food homestead food. It's fast food. It's pork chops from the sous vide, because all I have to do is fill it with water, hit go, walk away, and come back whenever I want. A couple hours later, not too many hours later, not like 6 hours later. But if they've gone for 2 hours or 3 hours, that's fine. And then all the side dishes are ready, like salads or whatever, and we just sear them off, and it's super easy. So we'll be eating through some of those on the sooner side rather than on the later side, because the pork has been around a while. And then I sent Tactical to the store with a list of things to buy for the next 3 weeks that I call the Teenage Road Trip for Keto. And it just so happened that the day I did that, I got a Facebook message from a listener whose son's in the ICU. And she asked me, how do you stay keto when you're in a situation like this? Because I'm spending, as many hours as I'm allowed to with my son. It's a 2-hour drive each way. So that's 4 hours in the car to see him every single day. And I find it really hard not to just hit fast food as the easy button because I get hungry. And so what resulted from this question was me, thinking, I should go over this on the podcast because we haven't talked about this topic in a while. And there are times when you get really busy and you need the easy food. But if you're trying to stay on more of a whole foods oriented diet, that can be really hard, because like Sonic or Burger King or Arby's are not going to get you through. You may end up hitting one of those at some point, but that's not the lifestyle we're trying to leave. And I know at this point, having eaten clean for so long, whenever I hit those places, I have a tendency to get sick. Now, it used to be I could just get Arby's hero sandwich with nothing else, just a pile of meat, and eat it and be fine. But the last time I had that, I got Wheatney, which tells me there's probably wheat in there, which for me is not working. For you, that might work. So I thought about it and I thought, I'm going to answer right away. And what resulted was a text chain with a lot of ideas. And I said, well, the first thing I have on hand are sugar-free meat sticks that I get at Aldi. And those are great. I buy pork breakfast patties if I don't have any pre-made in my freezer, because I'm not going to make them, not when it's busy. And I pre-cook those, and just like, I'll cook 24 of them and just throw them in the fridge in Tupperware, and I'll grab the Tupperware or a Ziploc baggie on the way out. If I'm out and about and haven't planned, I do go to somewhere like Sonic and order pork breakfast patties, like in sets of 10 with nothing else, just a la carte. So that's another thing you can do if you end up having to order at a place. Other ideas are pre-cooked hamburger patties. Works really well as a grab and go. Jerky. She was like, I'm sick of jerky and nuts. And I'm like, yep. So I'm not going to say jerky, but those meat sticks do make a huge difference. Deviled eggs are really great. They take some time to do, and they're for me easier to eat than hard-boiled eggs, which are also an option. Hard-boiled eggs to me are a little dry and take a lot of chewing, and that's fine, but not awesome. You can buy pre-cooked bacon at the store. You can buy lunch meat at the store and roll up lunch meat with like cream cheese or cheeses, and that adds a different like take on that. Aldi has these really cool like mozzarella cheese sticks with meat wrapped around them. I've been known to just buy some of those. I will get pork rinds and cheese dip, or I'll make my own cheese dip by taking cream cheese and adding flavors like some salt. Go sparingly on the salt though, because it's already got salt in it. And like smoked paprika or dill weed or like Italian seasoning mixes, and you stir it up. And you can take your pork rinds and dip it out. You can do pork rinds in salsa. You can do pork rinds in spinach dip. There's all sorts of stuff you can do that way. And then if you have access to hot water, there's a whole new world that opens up to you in the form of freeze-dried meals. I freeze dry leftover soups and stews and then have them in bags. And then I can I travel with a coffee cup that's insulated, pour it in there, pour hot water in there, stir it up with a spork, and I have like awesome tasting chili or chicken soup or whatever it is that I have freeze dried. And my go-to is chili. And then the other thing is, in a crisis situation, it's not the end of the world if you occasionally go off plan, but those are ways to stay on plan. So that's sort of like my breadth of ideas. I'm putting this on the podcast so it helps somebody who's in this situation. I'm also putting it on the podcast so we can keep this person in our thoughts, because I cannot imagine what it would be like to have a son in the ICU. I know what it's like to have a friend and a relative in the ICU who's older than me, but when it's your own children, man, my heart goes out to you. She saw all my ideas and was like, I have a freeze dryer and I have freeze dried meals. I don't know why I didn't think of it. It's because when you're in that kind of a crisis, your brain isn't working as well. And I use like the 7 mushroom Stemets additive in my coffee sometimes when I'm having trouble focusing. So that's another thing you can do to just kind of support your brain. But don't come down on yourself for not thinking of it. Of course you didn't think of it. Guys, if you hear this and you're like, you really missed this one really good idea, Nicole, like a pre-cooked ham, send it in and I'll read those out on Monday just as additional ideas, or go over to our social platforms. We have active groups on Telegram and MeWe, and there is a semi-active group on Facebook. It's Living Free in Tennessee. Just look for us and put your ideas in there too, so that we can share more ways to stay true to your whole food desires when you're in a situation that's really complicated like this, because it is hard. It's really, really hard. Also, cart water with you, because it's very easy to get dehydrated. When you're dehydrated, it hits your mental acuity. And when you don't have a mental acuity, it's harder to think things through. And in a situation like this, you're usually being asked to make a lot of decisions. So those are my thoughts on buying keto treats like you're on a teenage road trip, which I'm about to be on. So I sent Tactical with a long list of things for me. So I have some stuff to take to Kansas. Next up, we have Holler Neighbors and Community. This is where we talk about how the community is pulling together things we do. So it's busy. In 2 weeks is Self-Reliance Festival. And it's like the universe is interesting, right? I've been really interested in the last 2 months about getting a Speed Queen washing machine, because they wash clothes better. And I get frustrated with just the quality of washing machines. I have a really old washer from the early 80s that uses water to clean clothes, and it works pretty well. But I was like, we are redoing all my floor joists, and eventually, hopefully by midwinter, I will have a new floor in over the top of the subfloor. And I'd really hate to have this washer have its last moments all over my new floor and ruin the floor. So I've been window shopping, drooling at Speed Queen washers. My dryer's in really good shape. And I've been looking at them used online and seeing unbelievable deals that I didn't believe, and some decent deals that I can get on used ones. And like, I'm like, do I want a used one? Do I want a new? Do I just want to get a coin operated one? Because those things wash some clothes, man. So you know when a really good time for your washing machine to go out would be? Yeah, 2 weeks before Self-Reliance Festival, when you really feel like it'd be fun to go to all the way to town with all your laundry and sit at a laundromat. That's when you totally want your washing machine to go out. So yesterday it did. And what broke is that it stopped agitating or spinning. Now, I'm 90% confident that a part could be replaced to fix this. I don't know how. I don't like, now is not the time for me to go to YouTube University and figure out how to fix it. And so I just laughed because it was Tactical's clothes and the spin cycle never happened. So they were sopping wet, right? Like you got to hand wring these out and hang them up, and it's a huge pain in the neck. But here's the deal. Holler neighbors and community have had my back for so long that 2.5 years ago, when Nighthawk was at his new job, he was on a construction site and they had a washer and dryer there that was in decent condition that was in the way. And they were like, if you give me $150, you can take this washer and dryer home. And at that time, we were working on base camp and I was using it as an Airbnb. And I was like, what'd be really cool is we can put this washer and dryer in there. And then it's only $150. It's in a basement. If for some reason it has a catastrophic failure, it's a cement floor. Like, it's not a big deal. Just got to keep an eye on it. And so I was like, yeah, I'll give you $150. Let's just throw them in the basement. And then Jenny moved in and she brought her own washer and dryer. And when she left, was unable to sell it. So those are still there. So there's 2 washers and 2 dryers in base camp, one whole set of which is not being used. And I was like, sweet, I have a backup washer. So I sent a text to Steve next door. I'm like, hey, how do you feel about moving that washer over here and taking my broken washer back over there? Because I am going to try to fix it. And he was like, sure thing. And I waited till Tactical got home from town and they moved the new washer in, and it had like leaves in it from having been outside at this construction site. So I had to do 2 loads of water last night. And there was a little bit of a leak, but it was how tight we had put the hose clamps on, and Tactical climbed up over the top of it and fixed that. And I kept cleaning, like there was leaves, but it also looked like somebody had taken a really old carpet and washed it into like chunks of weird old carpet. And they also used fabric softener. So the fabric softener chute in the middle really smells like fabric softener, which is not a smell I like. So I'm going to put boiling water down that later today. But I was able to just sort of do my things and then every so often pop back in and so I run a load, and the spin cycle forces all the leaves to the outside drum, and then I would clean those out manually, and then I'd do another load, just water, cold water, and it would like send them to the outside. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do dog blankets, because if it gets little chunks of leaves on it, it's not a big deal. Like, we'll do that. So I managed to get the last chunks out, I think, with the dog blanket run. And then I redid Tactical's clothes because they'd been sitting around in a pile of wet all day. And I'm back up and running. So that was really a great use of the community. And it was a long story in the making, starting with Nighthawk saying, hey, do you want a washer and dryer for $150? And I was like, yes, I do, because I have rentals. And when you have rentals, it's really nice to have some backup appliances. And that washer's in pretty good shape. So Hit'em 20 says Speed Queens are worth every penny. Yep. And I still am drooling over Speed Queens and looking to put one in my laundry room once all the remodel is finished, so that it's more of a new thing and we don't end up in a situation where this washer goes and the way it goes is by dumping all of its water all over the floor. So, because this one's also not a new washer, but it's in pretty good shape. So I'm not sad about it. If I end up doing, my duplex may become a temporary, like, traveling nurse rental that's furnished. If that happens, I am actually putting in the washer and dryer from Base Camp's basement in there, and having it pre-installed the way I need it installed to minimize any possible damage to the wood floors, the hardwood floors there. just because I think when you're a traveling nurse, you'd want to be able to do laundry in your own apartment. So they'll go there. And by that time, I will have really chipped away at the fabric softener buildup in the thing. And I mean, if I knew it was okay, I'd throw vinegar down there, but I'm just not sure because it's where it agitates, right? Where it moves. I don't want to like corrode the crap out of that with vinegar. So we'll see. Although it's looking fairly corroded in that area. Why increase the situation? But I think like some boiling water would really go a long way in that. Maybe not boiling, but hot. I'll start with hot, like tap hot water. We are seeking help among holler neighbors for animal processing, and the only people who know about that right now are Tactical and me, but I'll put a call out on our shared Zello channel about that. And then the wider network has been really helpful. I have had this duplex to get turned over, and usually I can do the work because I'm a really fast painter. And what we were at the phase, it's like my favorite phase. We get to paint the walls. I'm really good at that. I don't have time between now and Self-Reliance Festival to spend 16 hours painting walls. So I reached out to Ryan Steva from the homesteadconsultant.com, and he had some time. So he went in, and it was really great having him there. He painted the walls and the ceiling, and he identified some other things that needed to be updated. And on his last day on the way out, he walked out in the yard and saw a window pane on the ground and out of the window in the place next door, because they're like the double hung windows. And I don't know why that happened, but it happened. And he's like, "Do you want me to put that back in?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do, because then I don't have to drive all the way to Nashville to put that window back in." And so we were able to instantly repair that. So that was really cool. And I think having our network connections for these things, like Ryan and the Homestead Consultant and Carrie and Strong Roots Resources and Ken Esch, who runs a carpentry business, like having these guys, Matt, who does the electrical stuff, like having these guys and knowing we can trust them to do good work is a big benefit of the LFTN network. And I really felt the benefit of that here. Like the only reason I even found somebody to do the drywall mud is somebody from our network who I know lives in East Nashville was like, "Well, try this person." And so I tried that person, and then they referred another person, right? So, and then he's even popped over. He popped over to check the quality of the drywall job for me, so I didn't have to drive to town. That was really nice. And that's how it's not just about my spinning wheel, right? Like there's people all over the country who you can tap into. And that's what we mean when we say community. Like I trust this person who I've met a few times enough to walk into my duplex, give them the key and say, "Go on in there." And I don't think they're going to trash stuff. That's actually really nice to have. So, what we needed to do before renting the place was do a sewage pipe project. And the thing is, my house was built in 1960, around there, or 58. So it's old, and they used cast iron. And the issue is that they didn't build cleanouts into the system where one would want cleanouts, because I don't, maybe it wasn't done then, maybe it was to save money. And the cast iron pipe went from under the house all the way through the roof as the vent pipe, right? We had to cut through that. And when they put these in the old days, they didn't strap them up or anything. The ground is holding it up. So I had sent somebody in to do that, and it was one person, and Ryan happened to be there. And when he realized that it was not strapped anywhere, he was like, "I can't do this. We're going to have to call an emergency plumber, because this is, it's dangerous, because it's a lot of weight. If it falls on you, it could, like, maybe you take off your leg, like kill you. Not good." And I called our local plumbing store and said, "What are you supposed to do in this situation?" And they said, "You tie that puppy up however you want. They're usually in 4-foot lengths. And so you find where one of those joints are, and you use strapping, rope, whatever you've got, to tie that thing up so it doesn't fall down." Because we're splicing into it. We're not taking it out to add cleanouts. And so with the two of them there, there was an extra set of hands to work through the plumbing situation and like strategize on how to fix it. And two, there were two hands there so that nobody got hurt. So the project was completed without the emergency plumber, which is, I'm really thankful for that. I'm also like, 3 cleanouts were put in. More cleanouts were put in than will ever be needed. But that means next time I have a slow flush problem, there's a cleanout, because what happens is it's not so much in the toilet, it's on the other side of the toilet. Sometimes things get clogged up, and being able to access that to clear things through without having to take the toilet out in the unit is better for the renter, and it's better for us because we can go there anytime, pop under the house, clean out, done. And if it's coming from one side or the other, it doesn't matter because they kind of go into one sewage system there at the duplex. But yeah, so, a lot of community things happened that benefited me this week, and I'm really thankful for it. Next up, we have infrastructure, where I have nothing to say. And if you do not get questions in the next 30 seconds, we're about to end the show. And then finances, also nothing to report. We're in our last few days of September, and next week I will not be live for the Homestead Happening show because I'll be at the Midwest Preparedness Project giving my 15-minute Homestead presentation, checking out what they're all about, meeting a bunch of people that are, the bubbles overlap, but I haven't met everybody up there yet. So I'm stoked about that. We're going to expand the network and be a stronger network after next week. But that means we won't be live on Friday because I'll be there on Friday. I have a pre-recorded show arranged, and if there is time on Wednesday before I leave, I will record a Homestead Happenings update, but don't count on that because I'm skeptical about if that's going to happen. But I have pre-recorded some shows for the next 2 weeks just so we get through this busy time. And those of you who don't come to Self-Reliance Festival have something to listen to while we're at Self-Reliance Festival. And I mean, you can buy digital passes and just listen to Self-Reliance Festival, of course. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So I don't see any other questions coming in on the live feed, guys. It's been a good week at the Homestead. Tactical has been somewhere every day this week, and right now he's picking up organic Timothy hay that our friends at Renegade Homestead really connected us with this person, but he's going to be 5-hour drive to go pick up the hay, which seems extreme, but it's hard to find hay without herbicides in it. And this year in our county, the herbicide that some of the farmers use, not all of it, have caused the horses and ruminants to die, to have kidney failure. And it's not hearsay. It's I actually know people who have lost animals. And so I decided that I didn't want to trust the farmers co-op hay source just in case. It's a risk I don't want to take with my flock. So they connected me with somebody who doesn't spray anything, uses organic practices. It was her second cutting last week, and she sells it first come, first serve. So he went out to get that, and it was sort of one of those things where it's I don't want to have to leave every day this week to do a Homestead thing, pick up feed and all of the things that he has done. But at the same time, today it's not raining, so we can transport hay. We've got to figure out how to get the hay up into the barn. That's going to be a trick. We don't know how we're doing that yet. And because it's up in the loft. So we're going to have to lift that up. And last time we had a way to do it that was easy, that was mechanical. So this time it's going to be people throwing bales up. So that means that he has not had forward momentum on the Homestead much. And he, what we have done is kept everybody healthy and managed to rotate sheep this week. And I canned salsa. I canned, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 jars of salsa. And I still have more salsa to make. So I think what I'm doing is pre-cutting the tomatoes and throwing them in the freezer for after Self-Reliance Festival. And I'll just make salsa then. But the only way we kept things going was I was doing a lot of things at nighttime after work, and I was working till 8 or 9 at night a lot of the times this week. So it's not all, early nights and roses, guys. That's just the deal. But it's been a good week, and I feel really good about the foundation we have set going into next week and going into Self-Reliance Festival. I do have a last question here. Suggested grind for hollow roasts, latest coffee of the month, using a Mocha Master. I don't know what a Mocha Master is, but the variety of coffee should not impact the grind you use. So the question is, how do you usually grind it for that? Because what this month's coffee of the month is the Renegade Rwanda, which is very similar to our Brazil, but has a little bit more deeper chocolate and caramel flavors in it. And so if the Renegade Mocha Master is like an espresso grade machine, then I would go espresso grind. If it is a drip machine, I would go more of a coarser drip grind. If it's more like a French pressy thing, I'd do coarse. That's how I would do that. And, the pour over, I usually go on the coarser side than the more ground side. Next question is, any green chilies this year and related event? Nope. I decided that there was not time in our schedule for that. I am not home any weekend for the whole month of October. So that means that squishing that in seemed like a really terrible idea. And I learned to say no during 75 hard, really learned to say no during 75 hard. So hopefully next year I'll build that in. But if I'm going to build it in, I have to do a year in advance. I talked to Tim Monday. He's like, I'm not even saying yes to speaking engagements next year until next year because of how busy he made himself this year. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did and you want to support us, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. Don't forget, we've got Jack's Bourbon cooled out. It's the pre-launch. We will launch on Sunday, the 1st of October. Also, consider coming out to Midwest Preparedness Project or getting your tickets to Self-Reliance Festival. We will be also promoting Kentucky Sustainable Living really hard right after SRF, but that's also another great event to go to. It's the Three Sisters of Preparedness, the Great American Preparedness Tour. And with that, go out, make it a great week.